what's up weirdos, I'm Felicia and I like scary movies, and today I'm talking about another film that I saw in the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival this week, and that is called Sator. So this is an interesting movie. I didn't read anything about it beforehand, but I was intrigued because I read that Jordan Graham, who is the writer and director of this movie, also did basically every other job on the film, and I was like, oh wow, this is like a really DIY movie, and I was just intrigued by it. So I went and saw it, and it was, I would say from the beginning of the movie, just so menacing. It had the opening sequence of the movie was mostly in black and white. There's a lot of candles, there's a lot of very like occult vibes going on, and I was just like, man, this is like the spookiest atmosphere that I've seen in a movie in a long time. Like, it just feels so real, and a lot of the movie, I will say, had this vibe of found footage slash like documentary style filmmaking that made the movie feel very realistic and thus much scarier, I would say, than if they had filmed it in a traditional way. And I did hear the Q&A afterwards, and I am going to include some of that in my Brooklyn Horror Film Fest vlog that's going up next week. But it was interesting to hear him talk because he filmed this movie, I think it took him like 120 days or something, and he filmed a lot of the movie with an intention of making a very different film. And then he went to his actual grandmother's house, who is the woman playing Nona in this movie, and did all these interviews with her about something that is really a part of his family history, which is Sator, which is sort of this like occult entity, dark entity that his grandmother hears and talks to her and does all of this writing. And so this is like sort of how the movie started. And it's got such a creepy vibe to it where she is hearing information from Sator and she is just writing it down, like writing down whatever he says. And so a lot of the stuff in this movie is, you know, real and exists. And yes, he did like fictionalize the other characters in it to make it into a movie, but a lot of the footage is just sort of like his grandmother talking, and it is fascinating. And also, like, he had one of the actors come in and have a conversation with her and like pretend to be her grandson. And while watching the movie, like, I remember specifically those scenes that I was just like, this doesn't feel like a movie. This feels like real. This feels so real. Like, there is no way this woman is talking off of a script. Something I think this film did really, really well was building menacing tension. Like, tension on a very high level of me feeling so unsettled and so just worried about what was going to happen without showing me much, which I found very interesting. And you do get a nice payoff in this movie of sort of seeing what you want to see. But for most of this movie, you're dealing with a character named Adam. He's played by Gabe Nicholson, and he doesn't speak, I think he speaks like one time in the movie, and same with a lot of the other characters that barely speak. It is mostly a film that just has a lot of atmospheric sound happening and not a lot of talking. But somehow through that, I felt like on the edge of my seat a lot. I wonder how I would do watching this movie, because in this way it does feel sort of homemade, and it feels like, you know what I said earlier about the documentary found footage style thing. Like, I think I actually would have been even more terrified if I just like watched this movie on like a VHS tape in my room. Like, I feel like I would think it was just some sort of like a cult film that was going to now take over my life or something like that. You know what it sort of feels like to me? There are things about this movie that sort of feel like a nightmare. There are moments, particularly one where our main character Adam is in his cabin and someone is there he didn't realize was there. That's all I'll say. And that moment for me was like, it sort of feels like an out-of-body experience, some of this movie. And so it just, and the way in which it's edited, I just was like, yeah, like this does feel sort of like a nightmare, with like cuts of home video in it. And that's just like an interesting thing. Like, I feel like I haven't really seen a movie like this, especially one that was as effective. So good on you, sir. Also through the Q&A, I found out that almost all the sound of the movie was made by Jordan Graham. A lot of it just using like household items. Like he talked about using pots and pans, and actually like all the wind you hear is just him blowing into a microphone. And it did have that sort of organic feel to it while I was listening to it, but I don't think I ever would have guessed that that was just him, you know, making those sounds in his house. Like it felt very professional, and same with a lot of the special effects in this movie. Hearing him talk about the way that he made those things happen was sort of shocking to me. I was like, you just figured it out. Like it seems like a lot of these things on this movie he didn't know how to do or pay for, and so he just figured it out. And there's something very exciting about that because it was so successful. The only thing that I had issue with while watching the movie is that the timeline for me felt very confusing. There was a lot of times that it sort of felt like we were going either back or forward in time, and I didn't have a clear understanding about where we were in the story. And I think this is because there's a strong lack of dialogue to the narrative, so it's like you're really relying on the images, and certain things change throughout the movie. Certain sequences are in black and white, certain are in color, and it does the timeline of the film gets a little bit confusing. And unfortunately, and that doesn't really matter if it doesn't take me out of the atmosphere of the film or take me out of the film, but sometimes I did find it taking me out and me being like, wait, what's going on? Where are we right now? I don't know what the distribution plan for this one is at all. Once I find out or once I hear more about it, I will definitely put it in the description of this video and of course tweet it out and all that. But it's on the festival circuit right now, so if you have film festivals near where you live, I would check and see if it's on there. The only thing about this movie is they do have an IMDb page, but there's basically nothing on it. So I'm not sure how hard it is to find info on this film, but I'm just putting it out there for when it comes back around. But Sator is pretty cool movie. Pretty cool movie. But that's it, y'all. That's all I'm going to say about this one. I will see you in tomorrow's video, and have a nice scream. Bye.